on the back foot for Saturday, even if he actually did a good job to get somewhere near a pole chance.
Yeah, in the mix in Q3. Fred Vasseur, team principal at Ferrari, saying after Canada that the team just didn't maximise what they had underneath them. There have been continued reports in the Italian media about the direction the team is going, whether there will be personnel changes. We know there will be big rule changes. Last time we had one of those was ahead of 2022 when Ferrari, they sorted the reliability out, had a rapid car. They just couldn't always get it to the finish. It was Max Verstappen who claimed the championship, and once they got that Red Bull to the weight limit, it's going to be an issue again in 2026, but once Red Bull got that car to the weight limit, that was the dominant package, and we saw that back end of 22 into 23. When things got more competitive last year, it's been McLaren's championship so far. They are top two in the drivers' standings, and they continue to lead the constructors' points battle, as you saw earlier on. Oscar Piastri leading on 198 points, 5 times a race winner this year. This is the 11th round of the season. Driver who finished about 2 seconds away from George Russell, our winner here last year, after putting a superb move on Carlos Sainz, and it really appeared that anything could happen in that Grand Prix. Green light at the end of the pit lane, and we have cars moving out onto the circuit, including Franco Colapinto. Not sure we saw too much of the Argentine driver earlier on in FP1, but the message from the team is he will continue beyond his allotted 5 races. They will continue to evaluate him. Here's the ominous bit. That sentence started so well, didn't it, for Franco? On a race-by-race basis.
Nonsense.
There we go. The Jolyon Palmer nonsense button has been pressed in the opening minute.
Well, he did a good job in Canada, I thought, overall. Qualifying, he started the race in 10th. So he had a really good shot, managed to get up into 9th momentarily with the duel with Alex Albon on the first lap. And then the strategy sort of shuffled him back and away from the points. But, we're just into a window where they've replaced Jack Doohan brutally after just a few races at the start of the year. Put Franco Colapinto in, and we know what Franco could do from last year. It's honestly taken him a little bit longer with Alpine than it did with Williams to find some form. At least he showed something in Canada. But race-by-race basis for a driver that's done less than, 10 Grand Prix in his career? It's maybe a couple more now, but it's crazy. He's had no pre-season testing this season. To make a change and then think, but if you're any bad race now and you could be out, it's not what a driver needs. You need to have confidence. You need to feel a bit of loving from your team.
It will be his 14th start in Formula One on Sunday. Sam Collins.
Race-by-race deals used to be quite common in Formula One back when the field was a bit more spread out, going back into the 90s, making myself sound old. We had teams like Minardi, even HRT more recently into the 21st century. Those teams would have drivers in, like Sakon Yamamoto, people like that, on a race-by-race basis, Giovanni Lavaggi in the Minardi, because that's when the money came through. So they had to pay their way race-by-race to keep the seat. Otherwise, there was somebody else willing to pay that check. I'm not sure this is that situation.
Well, is it when you're trying to align Alpine in 2025 to Sakon Yamamoto having a one-off with Super Aguri back in the day, or HRT as well, he did jump in for, so...
Something's not right. My steering is pulling me massively to the right.
Understood.
You can actually see that on the screen here. You can see Lawson with his hand, left hand down, as some people might describe it. You can see him as he turns through this corner through the right-hander. Now, when he gets back on the straight, you'll see as the car goes straight, he'll have to be turning left, or the car's moving to the right because the track moved to the right. And he's really fighting to try and... He's lost his confidence in that, hasn't he? Various things could cause that.
Something's not right. My steering is pulling me massively to the right.
Understood.
Going into it.
Well, an unusual one for the Fans-based team to deal with, and Liam Lawson trying to bring it back so they can fix that problem and he can get a meaningful second hour of practice as we get our first look at a driver who's always seemed to thrive around.
If I let go of the steering, it goes hard right.
2020, and he finds himself attacking the racetrack for the first time this weekend, having made way for Alex Dunn, who had a superb early session. If you weren't with us earlier on, he was fourth fastest.
Which I think would have been nice for Lando to watch. Someone take his car out and show that there's still plenty of pace in it as well. And we know Lando's struggled to get the most out of it at crunch times, but he has nonetheless shown his own pace this year as well. Grand Prix wins, loads of race pace in Canada, which will be the big frustration for him with the way that it ended and the commotion and the potential drama and fallout between himself and Oscar. Seems like the team have navigated their way nicely through that inter-team collision, and now Lando can focus on his next weekend. Finally gets a chance now and puts the time on the board. He does like this place. I think this is a good couple of races really for Norris coming up. Circuits where he's always had form in Austria. Home race next week as well. Needs to try and kick back after Canada.
Thrilling stuff for Lance Stroll. Not the fastest way through the corner, but exciting for us to watch the correction as he makes his way through the first turn. This is towards the end of the lap. Kimi Antonelli sparks from the underside of the car and a bit of gravel thrown onto the curb on the exit of turn 9.
Getting a little bit looser with the exit of turn 9. Super quick corner. We saw a few cars struggling on the way in earlier on in FP1. We'll see more in FP3 tomorrow, I'm quite sure. It's this part of the circuit then. George Russell with the fastest first sector, much cleaner through turns 9. And then you're immediately into turn 10, using all the road on the exit and up to the line. Mercedes looking good so far in this weekend. Very strong Russell in FP1, and they hit the top again.
George Russell with a good early effort on the medium tyres. George Russell without a contract for next year. Are you surprised by that, Jolyon?
Well, I'm not shocked, just because of the way that Mercedes operate. You never see, when we've had Lewis Hamilton for years get to Silverstone or beyond without a definite contract, but he's always had, the air of Lewis Hamilton. He's 7-time world champion. He's achieved so much with Mercedes that he had the confidence that something would get over the line, and it was just about thrashing out the detail. So the fact that he hasn't had it confirmed yet doesn't shock me. But a couple of the mutterings now are starting to be a little bit more interesting coming out of George. Saying that Max is a great prospect. Of course, anyone would want to speak to Max, and he hasn't got quite the confidence of Lewis in the negotiation, I would say.
I think George has got a pretty strong hand, depending on other movements that are rumoured. I mean, is Max Verstappen staying at Red Bull? Looks likely to me that he will. There's still rumours about that. There's rumours about Aston Martin. There's even rumours about Alpine, though I'm not sure why George would want to go there next year. He's got a stable situation where he could, for the right deal, stay at Mercedes and be team leader, and it's going quite well for him at the moment.
We don't know that he could. That's the point.
Well, that's the other rumour, isn't it? That there might be a Dutch flag on the side of the Mercedes next year. Big switch, but who knows?
Russell's been a brilliant driver this year, though. Actually, for the last year and a half, he's been superb. He outscored Lewis last year. He's clearly showing the way to Kimi so far in this season. Of course, Antonelli just a rookie, so you wouldn't expect him to be quite there. But George is leading the team brilliantly. Took the win. He's been very, very consistent at achieving results. He's not making many errors, and he seems to be a championship contender in the right car. And the Mercedes is not quite there, but there are more and more glimmers that it's close. And of course, the big rule change. You'd say it could be a good place to be for next year. So I think I'm surprised that he's not actually re-signed for next year in some ways, because of the performance that he's put in, but just the way that Mercedes operates, they always just bide their time.
It'll be very interesting if we leave Silverstone and there's no contract announcement. George Russell saying Mercedes would be crazy not to talk to Max Verstappen, given there's a possibility there. Let's go on board first of all to Alex Albon, who's heading to turn 3 and all over the road as he applies the power. Backs out of it as a result. And let's have another look. Super slow-mo at turn number 9. Ollie Behrman last earlier on. Bouncing over the curves. More sparks for you. More gravel for you. And now, at the top of the hill, at the top of the 63 metres elevation of this circuit, we bring in Mr. Alex Brundle.
Hey, it was interesting little moment there for the Williams, wasn't it? I've come right up to the top of the hill, top of the 63-metre elevation change we have here at the Red Bull Ring to show you the apex of turn 3, biggest braking zone on the racetrack, 65 kilometres per hour only down on the apex. Piastri, you can just see going through there, specifically accurate, as is Oliver Behrman through here. It's a really, really interesting apex, this one, because it's a nasty curb which can affect the way that the cars apply traction through the exit. I've seen both Aston Martins and that Williams of Albon with armfuls of opposite lock when they're going through here. On a fast lap. The Ferrari as well of Hamilton specifically doesn't like that inside curve. You can see Antonelli there, happier in the Williams to take a little bit more of it. And if you can take that inside curve with the car, it opens the corner up massively and allows you to get on the power through the exit in what is quite a long run then, down towards turn 4. Both Mercedes looking strong in here. Piastri just attacking the brakes and looking really, really accurate as well. Let's have a look at George Russell, who's just joining us up here at the top of the hill. Look, that Mercedes can jump all over the curb on the inside, and you can hear it delivering traction cleanly. Fascinating place to watch race cars. But, you know, there are some days I really love my job. Have a look at this out here. Is that something you put on a picture postcard or what? Back to you guys. I'm going to go back down the hill.
Thank you, Alex. It is an amazing view up there. What used to be turn 2, it's now turn 3. It's the sort of thing he'd have moaned about in the past. But you send him up to the top of the hill, he's very happy.
Oh, joyous. A lovely view. You can come to this part of the world with no Formula One and enjoy the lovely vistas. Then you enjoy them with the Formula One. You're getting the best of everything, aren't you?
Over the line goes George Russell. He's 700ths of a second behind Lando Norris, who didn't take part in FP1, but currently tops FP2. We've then got Piastri, Antonelli, Leclerc, Alonso, Hadjar, Stroll, Sainz, and Paletto. He's looking at back-to-back top 10s, having been P6.
No sign of Max Verstappen in the session so far. Tsunoda has been out and is out on a flying lap right now, so he's about to put a time on the board. Lawson, we saw having that seemed to be a brake issue on the right front, and he's come back into the pits. Let's have a look at Oscar through the first corner. A bumpy ride to the exit of that sausage curb. There we go, the raised yellow curb. As soon as you go on that, you start breaking traction and bouncing around, and that would have hurt Oscar's exit. Up towards Alex Brundle at turn 3.
We were talking about this track being a Lando Norris special. I'm just getting the penalty point reminder for Max Verstappen at the bottom of your screen there. The 2 points expire at the end of this race weekend. From Oscar Piastri's point of view, Jonan, are you looking at that from his side of the garage and thinking, it's a bit of a 6-pointer this, if I can take Austria off Lando and deny him one of his very best circuits in terms of his form, his general pace, do you think like that as a driver, or is it just a case of approach each weekend as it comes?
No, I think you approach each weekend as it comes. You know, it's not like the home crowd. There will be next week technically for Lando, but of course there was in Melbourne, and it didn't help Oscar out at that time. And every race is different. You know, I thought Lando would go pretty well in Barcelona, but he never quite looked that hooked up, and Oscar won the race, sort of keeping it out of arm's reach. So I think that the way that they're both going, every weekend is a chance. Even if you look at Monaco, last year it was Oscar that looked so much better, but then as soon as the cars hit the ground at FP1 in Monaco this year, Oscar looked a little bit more out of sorts, hit the barriers a few times, and Lando had probably his best weekend of the year.
The car is not decelerating at all into turn 1.
So Charles Leclerc struggling to scrub the speed off. He's down to 6th place. Alex Albon has gone into the top 4. 0.6 of a second off the pace. Big gap between Lando Norris and George Russell, both set on the medium tyre. Hard tyre for Oscar Piastri, and hard tyre for Alex Albon, which is encouraging.
It's a bit of a flex from Norris, this, isn't it? 3 flying laps.
The car is not decelerating at all into turn 1.
Establish himself in the battle to win his first World Championship. He's non-score last time out. He's first in the Grand Prix format this year.
Notably, this will be his first on-track experience of that revised suspension package that McLaren have brought to this circuit specifically to give him that better feeling, get rid of that numbness that Alex Brundle was talking about in FP1. McLaren have introduced new front and rear suspension on that car to try to give Norris a bit more feeling, a bit more confidence in the way the car feels and handles. Doesn't sound like Piastri is going to be using that setup, but it does seem to be a Norris-specific package, and I wonder if that will work. I wonder if that's the reason that Norris is now ahead of Piastri. We'll have to see how it plays forwards.
Medium tyres for Norris, hard tyres for Piastri. There is a tyre offset pretty much cleanly across the field there. But we haven't seen the medium and the hard being that different in terms of pace either so far from what we've seen. The hard tyre looks very capable, as proven by Carlos Sainz jumping up to second place. Verstappen has hit the track. Let's have a look at Max then, sweeping through. That's the tricky right-hander up the hill.
For some reason, I had no pace, mate.
That's a worrying old radio message for Lewis Hamilton. It's never been a circuit that he feels twins perfectly.
For some reason, I had no pace, mate.
Lap shootout with his teammate Nico Rosberg. Tried a bit of defensive driving, did Rosberg. Didn't entirely go to plan. Hamilton won the Grand Prix. As a main, managed to watch that with my own eyes, watching in the GP2 paddock. As it was then, something when you see two cars climb the hill 60 metres contending for the win on the last lap. That was thrilling stuff. Since then, it's Max Verstappen town for a long time in this part of the world. And he goes up to second position on the soft tyre, completing that lap. Still a tenth behind Norris on the medium. And off the road, Charles Leclerc in the Ferrari. Complaining about turn one earlier on, he goes off in the infield section, leaving the racetrack on the exit of 6, rejoining before turn 7, but he's struggling to slow that Ferrari down.
Yeah, what's this looking like then? It must be a snap on the entry to 6, and he's just corrected it off through the gravel. Remember, Leclerc, within 2 laps of Montreal practice, crashed and put his whole weekend on the back foot. He's got so much pace when he's on the track, but he returns immediately to the pits now and will be happy that he's managed to just do that. Wait for a replay of what happened there. Hamilton has found some pace on a second lap then on the hards. He's now up in the top 10 and just ahead of his teammate by a couple of hundredths. Charles coming through. Is he just going to do a clean drive through the pit lane? Let's see then. Top of the hill, big braking zone with Leclerc. Already the car is super loose, so he's already lost the lap at this moment. That's a massive rear lock. Is this another lap?
And then just scrubs wide off the road.
I think it's an overcorrection. I think he has we go on board. Looked like there was a moment where he just has to correct and then points himself out, rather than just the front's completely washing.
Whoa! Dive off the racetrack, Kimi Antonelli.
Hey, what is going on with these people, honestly?
Lewis Hamilton ahead. It was Antonelli using the tarmac runoff area. Want to wind back to the incident with Charles Leclerc. Alex Brundle had a good view of it, overlooking it from turn 3, but looking at where he went off after this.
Well, I've just actually travelled down to turn 6. Yeah, I've just actually travelled down to turn 6, JC.
I could see Antonelli.
Russell referencing it earlier on the radio. You can feel a bit of a headwind as you head in then to turn 6. Leclerc was turning through that headwind. It's pretty clear as I stand here, slightly raised alongside the racetrack. And as he did so, almost every car is having a little bit of a moment as it turns through that headwind. But Leclerc had a bigger one and just, as you say, JP, overcorrected the car onto the outside gravel. Hadjar, or one of the RBs, did a very, very similar thing a few moments later. So I think a bit of difficult balance and wind related.
Thank you, Alex. Now at turn 6, having made his way down the hill from turn 3 and giving us the insight from the side of the racetrack.
That's a hot foot, isn't it?
He's a pacey guy.
Downhill.
Easier.
Let gravity take you.
Much easier. As a man who did a track run last year.
Oh, it's a tough one.
I'm not quite like my track runs to be quite flat.
Yeah.
Like a Silverstone or a Melbourne. That sounds terrific.
Just overtaking a load of keen F3 drivers up this hill to turn 3, and then realising I couldn't stop once I passed them. So you've got to keep on going all the way down the hill. These circuits are really steep. There are more and more coming on the calendar. This is obviously a classic. Somewhere like Austin, the first corner as well, massively steep. Of course, Spa, another classic. You've got Eau Rouge, and the cameras just don't do them justice. When you're running them, or when you're strapped into a Formula One car sitting on the ground, the elevation change is quite something. It makes them really fun to drive.
Talking of really fun, Davide Valsecchi is down in the pit lane at McLaren.
Alex, we are in front of the garage of Lando Norris, and I would like to underline how impressive was Lando Norris in this first run, because he was immediately very, very quick. So I would like to underline how well balanced and how quick is the McLaren right now. In comparison to the Ferrari, Leclerc missed the first free practice session and is struggling in the first run. Norris did the same. As soon as he jumped in his McLaren, he was on top of the list. And Alex Dunn, the young driver that he was driving in FP1, he was the 4th quickest driver in the field, and that's strange, because he was leading the free practice session in Formula 2, then was 4th best in Formula 1, so the 4th quickest driver in the world, and then he repeated the qualifying in Formula 2 and was only 7th. Disappointed for him. And then a particular that we find on the nose of the McLaren. Look, we are on Norris, and the front nose is completely closed, while I think that Piastri used to have an hole on this front nose. Look, probably this hole, I don't know, I think Sam Collins maybe can answer better than me, but I think that probably is just for the temperature in the cockpit. Maybe Piastri is suffering a bit of the high temperature, a bit of heat, and he wants an oil to cool down and to have a bit more of fresh air. But interesting difference between the two cars in McLaren. Back to you, Alex.
Thank you, Davide. Sam Collins is going to pick up in a moment. That was Lando Norris deciding which way.
What the hell? Straight to the left.
Huge speed. If they got that wrong, they got away with it. Sam!
Yeah, that's just the driver cooling slot. So the drivers can open it, close it. There's 2 allowed on the front of each car, so you'll have one in the tip of the nose, and you'll have the additional one, which is up closer to the leading edge of the cockpit, where you have a much larger slot. On the Red Bull, they have really 2 small, neat little holes, which I don't really know how they get away with, but I think they link them in the middle to make it count as one hole, and then the nose tip hole. So interesting that Lando Norris needs a bit more cooling than Oscar Piastri. Jolien, did you have a preference on holes?
Not really. It's only done 3 laps of the weekend as well. This is all just preset stuff, and then I guess they'll figure it out based on the temperature through the weekend.
"38 minutes to go. Lando Norris, George Russell, Max Verstappen, Oscar Piastri, and now up to 5th place, Kimi Antonelli on the Red Bull soft tyre. And he completes that. Okay, he's having a bad session at the moment. Again, Ollie Behrman finds himself at the back of the pack. 3-point scores for this year for the British driver with his first full season. Colapinto 1.4 away. Hulkenberg, back-to-back point-scoring finishes, and then Ocon, Lawson, and Tsunoda, then Alonso, Gasly, Stroll, Albon in P10. You hear Pierre Hamlin quite a lot of times on the radio to Isaac Hadjar, a race engineer who seems to get a great rapport very, very early on with his driver, and it's proved the same again. And from Paris, runner-up in last year's Formula 2 Championship, has held his hand up and said, look, I've got a really well-balanced car here. I know that. That's why I'm being able to produce it. But he's got up to speed quickly in Formula 1. And he's many people in the paddocks rookie of the season so far. He's looking to return to the points once again this weekend. If he does so, it'll be his 6th point-scoring finish of his rookie season.
Soft tyres for him on this flyer. Rumbles over the curb on the entry, clips the apex and goes quite wide on the exit curb as well. Hajar through the first corner, which is the first sector as well, as we now come up towards the top of the hill. Hit the brakes, and there we go, already through the first sector. So it's just one corner at that point that you can use the curbs quite well and aggressively, especially if you're in Hajar's compliant RB car. You can hear again the traction braking on the exit curb of turn 3. Down the hill we plunge, difficult braking zone, always suckers you into having a little bit of a front right lock and potentially running wide into that gravel. Goes through cleanly. Nice couple of corners where Alex Brundle's standing through the headwind. Hajar then sweeping through into the quicker corner, turns 7 and 8, and he's missed the apex of 7 there. And it looks like he's backed out of it as a result of that.
Great shame, because it's going very nicely on a new set of soft tyres in the middle sector, and his teammate goes past, and that's the end of that. It's coming off the back of a weekend where he had his worst result when he's finished the Grand Prix of his rookie season. They just did not find a balance with that car across the entire weekend in Montreal, and then you're hoping for one of those Canadian Grand Prix. They didn't get it, and he finished out on the points in 16th.
Yeah, the washout was crazy.
So that's the understeer, I'm imagining, that he's talking about there at turn 7, where he just couldn't get the car turned in and connected to that apex. And then you're sort of scrabbling your way through the right-hand swerve of that, which is turn 8. So you've got to just wait, and there's a short blast.
Yeah, the washout was crazy.
Quick change and go again. See if that can just help him in the high-speed change of direction.
Kimi Antonelli refining things, having brushed the gravel earlier on. Oh, no, he did so at the end. Got to wait to the end of those super slow-mos. There's a long curb down there on the exit of the Jochen.
Well, you go from the exit of 9 to the entry of 10. And do you remember a couple of years ago, Sergio Perez kept getting laps deleted, where he'd get through 9 okay, but then sort of choose to drive off the road, opening up 10. And he couldn't understand why, because it looked okay, but that curb runs you down there, and the whole way, if you go out wide, you're finding that you're opening up the circuit. You should be able to find minimum corner speed, and that's the lure. Here we go with George coming through. So out wide to the curb, and then stay there all the way until you pick up that turn in for the final corner, and then run that one on the exit as well. And Russell goes through to the top of the times.
And he goes 0.2 of a second ahead of Lando Norris. Fastest of anyone in the first sector. Personal best, Sector 2 and Sector 3. Hajar had the best time in the middle part of the lap, then got dirty air from the car in front, and Lando Norris has the best time in the final third of the racetrack. Russell the winner here last year. Norris, who's had a podium, multiple podiums around this racetrack, and contended for the win, looking for his first Austrian Grand Prix win this year. There's Ron Meadows, who's been in charge of the operational side of the team for a very long time down there. And in the seasons, George Russell just rests his hands on the top of the steering wheel, having completed his push lap. The team managers, very, very important with the way that they run things, their knowledge of the rule book, their interaction with the team, as the man at turn 6 knows well. We're sending you Franco Colapinto, Alex Brundle.
Oh, very much looking forward to it. You've been sending me a bit of extra wind as well. The wind really whipping up then here at turn 6. And you can see it from the flags as well, up there at the top of the grandstand, look. It's a bit gusty, and that headwind catching a couple of drivers out. We're waiting for Franco Colapinto down here. Here he is then on his way into T6, arcs in nicely. That Alpine looks like it misses a little mid-corner performance. Impressive in here is the Merc again. And the difference between it from trackside and the rest of the cars is in the second phase of the corner here. You can really see the Merc digs in with the right front and keeps turning through the exit. Oscar Piastri, the McLaren kicking up a lot more skid block as we often see at this phase of the weekend than anything else, running that rear really low to the floor through the exit there. It's one of the key limitations of ride height is the outside curb. Fernando Alonso looking relatively decent on a set of soft tyres. See the difference there with how compromised they're having to run the Aston Martin. It's much higher off the road. Lando Norris is purple, I'm being told, in the first sector. Let's see what he's got in the middle. The McLaren just doesn't quite have the purpose in the mid-corner here that the Mercedes does. I'm going to keep on watching here, but it really is a circuit of two halves in Red Bull Ring. This, the beginning of the second half, which is all about grip and downforce after those three big braking zones. So the Jekyll and Hyde of this racetrack, typified by the beginning of the second phase here at turn 6.
And even on a lap where Lando didn't look completely hooked up and was still fighting that small drift of oversteer that the wind is causing down at turn 6, he hooks up the sectors and goes to the top of the times. A tenth and a half clear of Oscar then, and the McLaren's right now sitting, well, it was 6 tenths clear of George Russell, but hey, Lance Stroll, he's having a good day, isn't he?
Lance Stroll hasn't been the lead Aston Martin on the grid for the Grand Prix format since Silverstone last year. It's our next Grand Prix. That's a great lap to give himself a bit of confidence behind the wheel. They're all chasing Lando Norris, who's fastest in all 3 sectors of the lap. You did see that moment on board. He was making that correction heading in to turn number 7. Not fully compliant, but rapid, as we've come to expect from the World Constructors Champions.
It looks like Lewis Hamilton's gone for a little trip through the Austrian countryside and found some of that pace he was lacking. He's picked up the pace and split the 2 Mercedes as well. I don't think we saw that live, but a good lap finally from the red car, though Charles Leclerc still in the garage by the look of it.
I mean, he is nearly a second away, though, from Norris. So on the times, he's up in 5th and splitting the Mercedes. We haven't seen what Leclerc can do on a set of softs yet. We'll wait for that. I'm also finding Verstappen's run plan very curious at the moment. He went straight out on a set of softs. He was the only car to do that. He waited as well for a while. He was the last car out and then just went straight for softs. So have they found an issue with a set of mediums or hards and then they've had to just bin them and chuck on the softs and crack on with that? Or are they going to do some sort of reverse plan here? Because normally the rest of the field now are coming back into the pits and thinking about a long run.
There's only 3 drivers in the field who haven't used a set of hards so far. Ollie Behrman, Esteban Ocon and Max Verstappen. So I do wonder if there is a bit of strategy at play here.
Bit of a brush of the gravel for Yuki Tsunoda, trying to find some form after 3 races without a point. The upgrades that have been brought to the Red Bull are not on his car for the weekend. Priority obviously being given to the driver in contention for the World Championship. A bit closer to Lando Norris. Does not look the car is happy through turn 10. When you add it all up, it's the 5th fastest time. Tsunoda goes 7 tenths of a second away from the pace of Lando Norris.
So again, on paper, that's all right for Tsunoda. He's up in 5th. This is a great FP2 for him. But the context is really strange in the session. McLaren are obviously, they must have turned up the wick to be doing what they're doing there, being so far clear of the rest of the field. Likewise, Stroll. I mean, that's a fantastic effort from Lance Stroll, 4 tenths down. And in that context is looking less good for the likes of the Mercedes, for Tsunoda and Hamilton. But then plenty of others have bolted on the softs and not gone nearly as quickly. So it seems like there's a tough sweet spot to find with these soft tyres, as we see Nico Hülkenberg not getting it right at the first corner. And if you can't find that sweet spot, then you're really struggling for pace. This was the slight drift that Lando had. Oh, just running wide and bit off the floor.
There's some damage off the back of the car there, you'll see it as well. A little bit of carbon fibre flew off.
Yeah, over the curbs on the exit of 7 and the entry to 8. We'll be checking what the data tells them about that, as the clouds slightly darker overhead at the moment. Track temperature running at 35 degrees, air temperature static. Slightly darker out there as we look at the man who was 5th fastest earlier on. Yeah, Gasly finds himself as the driver scoring the points so far this year for Alpine.
So that's Leclerc on an outlap now that Gasly has just cleared. So we'll keep an eye on what Charles can do in a couple of minutes' time. Pierre picking up a nice bit of slipstream there from Fernando Alonso down the hill. It all helps around here. A slipstream, I mean, there's a bigger performance gain there because it's such a short lap that if you can find a 10th of toe, you've got sort of fewer corners to lose it if you're an Alpine round the rest of the laps. It'll be a real boost there through the middle part, and they're just heading away from Gasly. And McLaren's so hooked up in the first half of the lap. 2 corners to go, the 2 right-handers.
Let's see, over the curb, the puff of smoke as he struck the curb with the car. Moves up to 9th position, past the main grandstand, and the media centre has an amazing view. Press are very happy when they visit the Austrian Grand Prix. And Lewis Hamilton, we're on board with him now. Ready to see what his teammate can do as well. He is also on a lap.
It's just finishing that out lap, Charles Leclerc. It's a lovely one to watch out for. Norris was trying to push again, and does try and push again. He finishes a lap 1/10 down on his best, so that's 2 flying laps of a similar pace for Lando, and consistency crucially in his driving so far in the only 34 minutes he's done this weekend.
This is Charles Leclerc climbing the hill. He's 2.5 tenths of a second away from Lando Norris in 16 seconds.
There's one corner. There's one corner and some straight lines for Ferrari and Leclerc, and that's a concern. I'm sure must be some power unit performance for McLaren to be this far ahead on such a short lap, and that'll be playing out in the first half of this lap with the full throttle sections. And now he heads in towards turn 6, where he's been through the gravel in this session. Now we're into the faster turns, and you can see the time still going away, but not quite as drastically through another couple of corners. Over the crest, and turn 9 will come into view very shortly. Blend out, down 1 gear, squeeze on the gas once more. Likewise at the final turn, he's just having to wait a little bit too long there, Charles, at the end of the lap, and the time still ebbs away kind of evenly across the board, but he's still into the top 5 within 7/10 of the pace.
That visor cam, as you saw coming across the line, setting the 5th fastest time. Check the mirrors to make sure no one was behind, and pulls off the racing line to slow down the car, to recharge the car, and to assess what Ferrari are missing. Sam?
I think there's something to what Jolien just said about power unit performance. Just looking at the timing screens as they are, it's not something we didn't see in the first session either. The Ferrari-powered cars all seem to be struggling a little bit on this circuit layout, whereas the Mercedes-powered cars all seem to be quite strong. The Hondas somewhere in the middle, and the 2 Renaults, well, we can't really draw conclusions because there's only 2 of them. But it does look like Ferrari just doesn't like the hard acceleration you need at this circuit, slow corners, hard acceleration. And that does seem to be power unit performance related, whereas if you look at the moment, the top 4 cars, all Mercedes powered, and then a smattering of other Mercedes powered cars. The only exceptions here are the 2 Williams cars. On the point of the Williams cars, Carlos Sainz had a difficult time out last time out, and Williams has gone and done some work on that. They've given him a new seat and adjusted his seating position in the car to feel a bit more comfortable, a bit lower, I believe, in the car, and they say that that's also improved the weight distribution of his car as well. So a change of seating position does seem to be something that Williams hope will improve Sainz's performance relative to Albon and overall. But Jolien, does a little change of seating position really improve how you drive a car?
I mean, it can change your obviously your vision, literally your perspective looking out, because you're sitting so low that you've got high cockpit size, you've got the wheels that take up a lot of space now in front of the driver's eye line, so you can't see things like curbs particularly well, you can't see car placement as well, and we've seen more and more instances, especially early on in the year, of drivers dropping wheels onto the grass or gravel and finding themselves in incidents. I don't remember Carlos being one of them particularly, but it could also just be a little bit of driver feel thing, just sitting slightly differently. You're feeling things slightly differently as well through your core and your body of how the car's reacting. So personal preference could be a physical thing as well for Carlos. You know, these are not the easiest cars to drive. We've got a couple of very fast circuits coming up as well. Silverstone next week is physical if you're not sitting in a perfectly comfortable way, and he's new to the team, so maybe it has taken him a few races to think, maybe I do just need a little bit more of that to find my absolute perfect position.
It's worth noting that Williams was not designed around Carlos Sainz. Each team designs its cars around the drivers who are driving for that team. Carlos Sainz switched from Ferrari to Williams, and the Williams he's driving is actually last year's car. So that was designed around Alex Albon and Logan Sargent, not around Carlos Sainz. So that might have a little factor to do with it, though Sainz isn't a particularly unusually sized or shaped driver, is he?
Well, the good thing for Sainz is that Albon kind of is. He's tall, and he's one of the taller drivers in the field. So it's way easier to fit a shorter driver into a taller driver's sort of design. You just bring the pedals a little bit closer. You obviously make your own seat and get your position right. You have padding around as well to make sure you're absolutely fine. when I first had a go in the Lotus in 2015, it was Romain Grosjean and Pastor Maldonado. Both were reasonably shorter than me, and it was quite difficult to get hunkered down enough, so I wasn't just having my head so high up, as some drivers drive a little bit more like that as well. Behrman and Ocon both have quite a high helmet position, but I actually struggled to get low enough in the car, which was harder. It was easier the next year when I was then the race driver.
When Yuki Tsunoda joins the then AlphaTauri team, he was actually too short for the car and had to have pedal extensions put into the car, so that's a bit like going rental karting.
Steering weight feels heavier this run than last run. Copy.
So George Russell talking about the weight of the steering as Ollie Behrman puts a couple of wheels in the gravel. He's been chasing it all day. Doesn't have the feel from behind the wheel for the Haas, and he is peeling back to the pit lane after that moment. Comes in, and they're chasing it at the moment. Ocon 15th, Behrman in 18th. Ocon reported his steering was light earlier on. Whatever issue Liam Lawson had with the brakes was fixed. He's currently 12th fastest and heading down to Haas, where Davide Valsecchi is right there. Is Ollie Behrman.
Alex, it's interesting the condition of us, because usually in the free practice we always see them on the low bottom of the classification, and then they surprise us very often during the race. And now, standing in his box, I realize why probably during the free practice they are not so competitive, because he just set the fastest lap time Ocon, and then he stayed in the track pushing for 4 or 5 more laps, so probably was just full of fuel. I mean, was using more fuel than the others to try the qualifying simulation. They are 6th in the championship. They were on point 9th, I think, in Canada. They are always or very often competitive in the race, but in free practice we cannot see them very on top. So probably it's the strategy. They are always very good in using the hard compound for the long distance, and probably also during the free practice they use a bit more fuel than the rivals. Interesting was also the condition of Verstappen, that struggling a lot to set the 3rd fastest time, and was following his lap. He had the first right and he made a mistake, and he was behind Tsunoda. That was very rare this year. And then the end, he pulled out a very good performance. 3rd in the standings at the moment. Seems that he's the best of the other, but maybe set the fastest time, his fastest time in a better condition of track than the rivals. We'll see. Back to you, Alex.
Thank you, Davide. Appreciate the update down in the pit lane. So Max Verstappen, 3rd position, 0.3 of a second off the pace.
So that's the second set of soft tyres that Max has thrown on in this session. He's the only driver in the field to do that. Said he hadn't run the mediums or the hards early on. Was that because of force majeure, or was it a strategic choice? And it looks more like a strategic choice then, that they've now thrown on a second set of soft tyres. So now he is in line in terms of tyre usage, but just not in the compound usage of everyone else. So it means that he has saved essentially a set of hard tyres for only be thought for the race. They can change that and bolt them on for FP3 tomorrow and get back in line with everyone else, Red Bull. But clearly today prioritising soft tyre pace at the cost of long running a medium or hard tyre with Max. Yuki will have a chance to do that. He's run the mediums so far, so he can bolt on a set of mediums for a long run, whilst Max will only be able to run the softs now.
Going through sporting directors, team managers, operational personnel, around the minute by minute of the teams. Andy Stevenson, who's most notable in recent years, when he argued immediately against the Fernando Alonso penalty in Saudi Arabia, and his knowledge, his instant recall of the rule book meant that they were able to get that penalty scrubbed out very, very quickly. That's what the experience of a good sporting director gets you. That's why the people in those roles tend to have been in those roles for a very, very long time. And a move like Jonathan Wheatley away from Red Bull to Sauber, shortly to become Audi, can have such a big impact.
So I thought of a rule after Montreal.
Go on.
Where we had the protest or the appeal from Red Bull to look at the Verstappen-Russell moment under the safety car. And Red Bull lodged the appeal. It cost them €2,000, and 5.5 hours later, it was decided that it was a non-event, that safety car moment. And it sure looked it, didn't it? In the grand scheme of racing, it's a 70-lap Grand Prix. There was one moment of, did someone half overtake under the safety car or not? There was a complete irrelevance to the rest of the race, where the positions weren't changed and there was no chance of a collision. No safety issues there. And it just felt like it didn't need to go to appeal at all. But of course, this was in the backdrop of Max only having 1 point left and Red Bull thinking that George was trying to play games with Max to try and get him that point. George said he didn't, and the rest of it. Anyway, I think there should be a 3 strikes policy. A bit like you have a challenge at Wimbledon.
Yep.
You have 3 challenges, or in Test match cricket, you have challenges against the umpires. But if you lose them, it's not about monetary costs. It's not about €2,000, which is peanuts to Formula One teams. It's about you actually lose your right to review or an appeal. If Red Bull were right in Montreal and the stewards said, yeah, you're actually right, George was out of order there, Max, you win the race, then they keep that appeal and it goes on. So they get 3 chances of being wrong basically in a year. Because otherwise, I just feel like the FIA and the stewards have a lot of work to do. And the decisions are scrutinised so carefully, and they're all worried about making the wrong decision. There's more emphasis on getting the right decision now. There's a panel of people looking on board. There's detailed systems or detailed sort of prescriptions on what incidents and penalties should be. The racing guidelines are in as well. But they don't need this extra level of just give that a check for us, will you? Give that a check. And just throwing mud at the wall and seeing what sticks.
I actually really like that idea, but there is one glitch in it. Imagine you've got a grid of 11 Formula One teams, as we're going to have next season, but 2 of those teams share common ownership. Surely that doubles the amount of appeals. So, for example, let's say Red Bull, they ran out of their 3 appeals. What if Racing Bulls then decided to help out Big Brother and put in some extra appeals? There's no rule. It would be hard to rule against that one.
Well, you're into a can of worms there, aren't you? Between Red Bull and Racing Bulls, on the bigger picture, shared ownership and title that comes down to the wire, and you've got a Racing Bull ahead of a Red Bull or a Racing Bull ahead of a McLaren. And what's going to be the difference? There's a lot in there. You have to take the rough with the smooth and deal with what we've got. What do you reckon?
I quite like Sam immediately going to how that rule could be circumvented. That rule was all of 1 minute old by the time that Sam was like, right, loophole, let's go. Total engineer at work. I like it. I do. I'm being told there's no challenges at Wimbledon anymore, by the way.
They've got rid of challenges.
They got rid of the line judges.
What?
It's all electronic.
Oh,
that's what I'm hearing.
It's coming in for this year, isn't it?
So, I can tell you, though, you still get 3 reviews in cricket, and hilarious. When you get a review badly applied and it's just a duff review and you lose it. It's one of my favourite bits of a test match.
But it's the same in tennis when someone's just there and they're just spent. They're absolutely knackered. They're getting a beating. They don't want to line up to receive the next serve. So they just give me a review on that one that was definitely it.
It was definitely a tactic, wasn't it? It was definitely a tactic. I like it. I like to be honest, I don't love long investigations into sporting penalties after the Grand Prix, even after qualifying. Like, if you've got the angles, if there's something where you need the extra data to have a look, I don't mind it dragging on a few hours. If the car's underway, if it fails a technical inspection, you've got to change the result afterwards. But sporting penalties, potentially 5 hours afterwards, that is not right.
Yeah, and for tiny, I think the sport's getting into nitpicking tiny, as you say, technical infringements. We're not talking about someone barging someone else off the road or overtaking off the track or, as something that has given them the win. Talking about the driver that led from pole, leading the whole time, braking fairly normally under the safety car, and somehow is then under investigation for 5.5 hours because another team wants to chance their arm. And they can chance their arm because it costs them €2,000. you know, they're not mates. Red Bull and Mercedes, absolutely not. So they'll try and get all the points they can. And of course, Red Bull are still thinking that Max can claw his way back in this championship. He's not completely out of it at this stage, so they need the points they can get. But if you have the challenge system, then you've got to be a little bit more thoughtful on when you want to do it, because there might be a time coming up in the second half of the season where they really could do with the challenge. Something has been missed, and they've used it up. You know, the classic from tennis in years gone by, or your cricket, probably other sports as well.
I like the idea. Certainly, if it gets us the result faster. Basically, the ideal scenario is that you'll watch at home. By the time you've got to the end of the post-race show, you know the result. That's the idea. That's the ideal. But sometimes there are other factors that come in. But that's Jolien's suggestion. We'll put it to Rui Marquez when we wander past him at the paddock at Silverstone in a week's time. Look forward to that. Rui, we've had a great idea.
Yeah, hear me out on this one. I know Sam Collins disagrees, but
I don't disagree. I think it's a great idea, but I'm just trying to work out ways around it.
Sam, you mentioned 11 teams next year.
Yes.
2 seats on the grid. Valtteri Bottas being heavily linked to that seat. Sergio Perez has been heavily linked to that seat as well. Cadillac. Anyone else in the mix, do we believe, for that team? Or do we think they're going to err on the side of experience?
It's a challenge one, because there are a few drivers out there floating around. Doohan, for example, looks like the way things stand, he might be floating in the air. I think he showed some promise in F1, but we never got to see what he could do. I don't think we're going to see the likes of Mick Schumacher there, for example.
Too much bouncing.
That is crazy time.
Too much bouncing.
Over the curves at turn 1. Let's hear now from Isaac Hadji.
Well, he's not going to let me by. I don't know why.
Okay, racing Bortoleto, couple of laps, on va essayer.
Isaac Hadja wanted the track space, not being given the track space, and he's still behind Gabriel Bortoleto.
that is the fun and games of 20 cars out there on a short circuit, trying to find a bit of clear space. But no one has to let anyone by at this point. They're all on long runs, all trying to work on their own performance, their own feedback. As Antonelli there sees himself run wide, just sort of washed wide without any massive drama there. Maybe just straddled that entry curb a little bit too much. He does love to open up the entries, doesn't he? He bit off a bit more than he could chew on that occasion. These are what the long runs are perfect for, though. Just a little bit of exploration, especially for your rookie drivers, just to figure out what curbs you can run. You're doing constant laps, so you can feel it lap on lap on lap, rather than do your push and then the tyres are shot. It's a good chance then just to feel it out.
Fernando Alonso, I think, was talking about too much bouncing in terms of the aerodynamics of the car. Not quite into that porpoising mode that we saw back in 2022, but certainly a bit of an oscillation caused by the ground effect floor, stalling and then reconnecting.
Yep, not feeling the love somehow. A lot of the front is not really gripping many places.
He's having one of his trickier days, isn't he, Nico Hülkenberg? On a good run of form at the moment, Samba with upgrades in Barcelona, and the team rising up the ranks, and Bortoletto's having a great day, up in the top 10 solidly, both sessions, but Nico right down the...
Yep, not feeling the love somehow. A lot of the front is not really gripping many places.
Strange one. They'll have a look at the data and see if they can find anything in there for Hülkenberg. But his race pace and his race form has been what's banking him the big points recently. 20
points for the season for Hülkenberg.
It's a good haul.
It's outstanding if you consider the struggles they've had in previous years. He's just converting every chance he's had.
That's what an experienced driver gets you. So we speak again of Cadillac coming in, and the two big names that are being floated around sensibly are Bottas and Perez. And when you look at what Hülkenberg can do against Bortoletto, who's a Formula 2 champ and is clearly a very fast driver, but Hülkenberg has banked the 20 points, and you've still got Bortoletto not able to get off the mark. At some point that will shift, but Cadillac want to give themselves the best chance they've got. So by putting in someone that's had a decade plus of Formula 1, you are getting a lot of knowledge with that driver versus taking a punt on a rookie. Where do you see the seats going then, Sam, at the moment?
I mean, the only factor outside of the two we've already mentioned is looking across the Atlantic. Someone like Marcus Ericsson is floating around. I'm not really sure we're going to go that way. Kevin Magnussen wouldn't be a ridiculous choice, but as Jolyon said, I think that team really needs experience rather than youth in that team. It's a new team. It's not a team that's carrying on. Hugely experienced engineers behind the scenes there, but I think there's going to be some real teething troubles for that team. Brand new car, brand new rule book, a lot to learn. They're using an established Ferrari power unit, but of course that will be new. It won't be the same power unit as this year. They won't be introducing their own power unit until 2029, I don't believe. So I think there's just a lot more to come for that Cadillac team. A lot to learn. So you do need a bit of experience, at least in year one. And Haas took that approach in response to their struggles having two young drivers when they had Schumacher and Mazepin in the car. And that didn't go so well for Haas, did it?
Yeah, Haas always wanted experienced drivers until they didn't. And they put Schumacher and Mazepin in, and it was a complete flunk of a season for them. I think it's a sensible approach for a new team, but it is whether you put it. I think the two best experienced choices, they've got to be Bottas and Perez. Both have been winning races, both have been in the top machinery. They know how Red Bull and Mercedes work. They can bring all of that knowledge back in. And, you know, Valtteri's still in Mercedes, absorbed in what is a race-winning team. And you know, Checo's no stranger to the game either. So I think at least one of them will come back, if not both of them. But then you wonder if an Alex Dunn or someone, you know, we've seen already a glimpse of what he can do, but another F2 prodigy who could do something similar to what Hadjar's done, even Antonelli maybe, and start to take it on beyond a couple of years as well, become immersed in that team could be an option.
That's the promise if you have a great Formula 2 season. It's especially the promise if you can get some feature wins on the board around this time of year. The value of being a strong points leader with good FP1s before September is massive, because the season for F2 goes all the way to December. So if you can look like the real deal as early as possible, you can force your way into the conversation.
Yeah, if you close out the season right at the end, there's probably no seats available anymore. The decisions are largely made up until August. Sometimes they go on through to September, occasionally into October and beyond. And you might get, you know, one team at the end of the season. It was Sauber last year, wasn't it, with Bortoletto hanging on a little bit to see who was around, because they're the last team. They need to announce drivers, and at that point you're a Formula 2 champion. It's all or nothing to launch into Sauber. So it is about putting the statements out there early on in the season. But that's what Dunn has done. His 2 feature race wins out of 5 as a rookie is a great effort. Top 4 in his first FP1 in Formula 1 was fantastic.
Yeah, struggling a lot with the front now.
Yeah, understood.
One driver, just on the Cadillac point, one driver that you might see, I don't think as a race driver, but maybe as a test and reserve driver or a driver ambassador, but someone who hovers in the...
Yeah, struggling a lot with the front now.
Yeah, understood.
Really don't think it's going to be a race driver, but how good would it be to have Florida Man as your marketing?
I was wondering how many ex-drivers we're going to launch into this. We've had a Magnussen, we've had an Ericsson, now we throw in a Sargent. I wasn't sure if we're going to get Alex Rossi. Out of stateside. Does he want to have a go in a Cadillac? No, I forgot about Sargent, yeah. Tough to see, but there's value in experience, and obviously having an American brand on the grid, American team, there's going to be value in them getting the most out of that as well.
Joke on you as well. His manager becoming team principal can never hurt in these circumstances. Who's a test and reserve driver for Ferrari this year. As Kimi Antonelli makes his way through turn 4. As he scrubs off the speed and goes down the hill.
That's the end of that front, right? Surely held on to that a long time into the apex. That is probably the hardest braking point on the circuit, the downhill at turn 4. We heard Max as well complaining he's got no more fronts. That's Max on the softs that he's run for 13 laps and run out of tyres. So that's not a very long distance that he's run that soft tyre, and doesn't look that usable if that's all he's got. But Antonelli there having a big lock up on the mediums too.
Is there something broken on the car? It's disastrous turn 1, turn 6. All over the place.
Okay, understood.
Pierre Gasly with a tricky piece of feedback for Alpine, saying it's just really tough.
Is there something broken on the car? It's disastrous turn 1, turn 6. All over the place.
Okay, understood.
Eamon scrubbing wide as well. The Williams pair, 16th and 17th, after a disappointing time in Canada where they felt there were more points on the table and they let the chance slip. This with one car.
Alpine now off the bottom of the constructor standings, 11 points compared to the 20 that Hulkenberg has scored. Sauber, that's 9th place. So that's pretty much it. They need a 5th place finish now to haul themselves off the bottom spot. It's a pretty bleak first half of the year for them. And when you consider the driver changes and all the fracas around Renault and everything else, it's a tough time for Alpine.
The silver lining for Alpine is that this very poor first half of the season does mean that they're getting a really chunky aerodynamic testing allowance, wind tunnel time and CFD, going into the second half of this year, which is critical for the development of the 2026 car. So they could be in a situation that Haas quite often found themselves in recent years, where they arrive at the start of the new regulations with quite an advanced design, because they've got a bit more time in the wind tunnel than anybody else, because it resets in June.
Do you think we've seen that play out as you expected? Because I don't think we get to the start of the next year. I know we're on a stable set of regulations, so the cars are kind of an iteration of the next, but we don't turn up to pre-season testing in Bahrain and suddenly the teams further back are lightning quick and then they drop back again in the year.
Oh, Julian, how many times have you rolled your eyes at me when I talk about Haas at race 1 in Bahrain and they're suddenly really good?
No, but you're usually wrong, Sam. That's why I'm rolling my eyes.
2022, Haas did do that, and they did get an advantage, but it didn't carry on through the year. I think you could see that with Alpine. Depends on the performance of the new Mercedes power unit. That's going to be in the back of that French car, no more Renault. That's the only advantage, but Sauber with the Audi power unit could also take advantage of that.
That would be the hope. As Sam was pointing out, Cadillac have to do it all from scratch. Audi have to make up the time. Good day for Gabriel Bortoleto in the top 10 for both sessions. Hulkenberg unable to dial the car in the same way. Norris only needed one session, he's top of the pile. 10th and a half ahead of his teammate Oscar Piastri. And then it's Verstappen, Stroll, Leclerc, Russell, Tsunoda, Bortoleto, Alonso and Hamilton as Ferrari try to understand the upgrades that they bolt onto the car, and the correlation, hopefully for them, will be matching up with the numbers they saw back in Maryland.
Okay, I think something is broken on the floor or something.
Okay, understood. We're looking through everything still, but still don't see it.
Okay, I think something is broken on the floor or something.
Okay, understood. We're looking through everything still, but still don't see anything at the moment.
Time as he's going to do a practice start, and this is him heading to turn number 1. You can see the issue that he's reported on the team radio.
The car just rolling into quite a big oversteer at the apex. It's strange and an inconsistent feeling probably for Pierre as well, where you're not expecting it and then suddenly it just has this big roll through the corner. Certainly something for Alpine to have a look at when they get the car back.
Alpine with work to do, 14th and 20th in the session. That's behind them, 15th and 18th. Williams pair 16th and 17th as we have our practice starts at the end of the day. And it's 2 minutes past 6 local time. As Lando Norris parks up. A very, very productive day for the driver, second in the World Championship. We look from the pit straight from behind the safety fencing as he completes his practice start. See the revs there displayed. And away we go. Practice start in the books, fastest of anyone so far. McLaren looking good. Max Verstappen, when I think everyone's running their engines at full beans, absolutely in the hunt as you would expect around this racetrack. And a good day for Lance Stroll. Driver chasing a bit of confidence. He's going to finish in the top 4 for Aston Martin. This is a recap of Lando Norris, who did break a bit of the car over that curb at turn 7, completing the lap, using the curbs. A couple of corrections across the lap, not on rails, but a very good start if you consider that he had 60 minutes behind the wheel in comparison to everyone having double. He's the driver with the fastest time, heading in to FP3, bouncing his way back to his team, who have elected to be the first in the order. That is the right of the Constructors' Champions to choose which end of the pit lane they want to be in. And here is Oscar Piastri, about to be received by the same team. Championship leader making another tidy start. A bit of pit stop practice for the third place man and Red Bull. After an unusual Friday, no GP on the radio for Max Verstappen. Already brought out of race engineering retirement. And taken from the factory back to the role that he's performed many times. He's on board Max Verstappen for his practice start. And straight on we go. It's been that kind of day.
Good practice though, because you want to see how late you can brake at that first corner. Max is thinking, if I'm on the front row, I want to know what the latest point I can brake is and still make the turn. The only way you know that is to kind of overcook it at one point. So he's just felt the limit of grip, and he'll bank that for Sunday.
Great pictures of a great racetrack, one that McLaren are enjoying an awful lot. Practice 2, complete with Lando Norris, top of the times. Oscar Piastri in second, 10th behind Max Verstappen in third. There you are, I promised you he was fastest. We'll click through to our pictures of the top 3 and we'll show you the 4 classification, which begins after these 3 with Lance Stroll. Only 0.4 of a second off, good time for him. Then it's Leclerc, Russell, Tsunoda and Bortoleto, twice in the top 10 today. Fernando Alonso in 9th. Lewis Hamilton completing the top 10 for Ferrari, but check the gap, 0.9 of a second. Next up, Kimi Antonelli, and then it's Liam Lawson ahead of Isaac Hadjar. Pierre Gasly reporting real handling trouble for his Alpine in 14th, and it was Esteban Ocon and Alex Albon. Carlos Sainz in 17th, and it's Behrman, Hulkenberg, and completing the field, Franco Colapinto for Alpine. Well, my thanks to Alex trackside, Davide in the pit lane, Sam Collins for his technical analysis, Jolyon Palmer for his driving analysis, and now we're going to chew through everything we've seen today down in the paddock with Nikki.
Lovely stuff. Lovely stuff. Thank you very much, guys. I feel like Lando Norris can suddenly breathe. Is that a bit of a sigh of relief? Obviously, he wasn't in the car in FP1 because the rookie Alex Dunn was in the car. He's had those suspension upgrades, and it looks like it's paid off.
It's certainly a return to form for the McLarens in that session, and Norris looks to have confidence. This is a slightly more front-limited track as well, where he has struggled in the past, but it is only FP2. It's one flying lap they've delivered on the soft tyre. Let's see if that continues through the weekend. But, you know, the march of Mercedes in the FP1 session, somewhat halted by McLaren in FP2. Perhaps a more valid session for qualifying in the race distance.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, coming into this, Davide, you know, all eyes, I suppose, were on the McLarens, on the Red Bulls, and then earlier it was Mercedes at the top. Not so true in this session.
Yeah, and to be honest, the gap of McLaren was very competitive in this session and surprised me and impressed, I think, me and all the rivals and the contender in the grid. And the gap between them and the other is not so small, because we need to consider the track here is very short. Usually the lap time in quali, they are all very close. but seems that they gave to us an answer very important. We come back in a place where it's normal, and boom, we are back on top. About Mercedes, I don't know. I think that Leclerc appeared to me a bit quicker than them, and seems that he's in a good form. Maybe Ferrari was not in the best one in the last few weekends, but also in the race opinionation, Leclerc surprised me. So maybe yesterday that I was pushing for Ferrari, and this morning seems that I was completely wrong. Maybe if we have some passion and some good luck tomorrow, we can be there. They can be top 4, top 5, and maybe podium for the weekend. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. We will keep a close eye on Ferrari and delve into that in a moment. But first, we are going to have a look at these 2 on-board laps. So we've got Max Verstappen versus, I think, Lando Norris. Take us through it, Alex.
It's an interesting one, isn't it? And it's a look at where that little bit of pace has come from McLaren. Max Verstappen, so successful here, tops almost every metric of the drivers that we have here this weekend. 0.5 of a second in the first corner. That's in pure apex speed for Lando Norris. Then Verstappen comes back at him a tiny bit through that first DRS zone. We know how efficient the Red Bull is in the DRS zone. Check Lando Norris out, able to ride that outside curb though on the exit of turn 3. Verstappen nowhere near it. Verstappen a little bit better up until this point, but now we can really see the aerodynamic efficiency of the McLaren. And you look at the timeline here as it curves away in favour of Lando Norris. It's on all of these apexes, just grinding out a bit of apex speed. 0.5, a tenth, all the way through turn 6 and 7, and then in the final sector there's another tenth in favour of Lando. That orange line just ahead, just above of Max Verstappen, grabbing a bit of extra apex speed. Pure efficiency in the shape of McLaren, and that's what they've got underneath them in this particular session. That's where the chart-topping pace has come from.
It seems that Verstappen was a bit struggling during the session because it was not easy for him to set that fastest time. Was it the second and the third try? And then his teammate, surprisingly, was closer than him than normal, because Tsunoda, with no updates, was then the top 10, right,
yeah,
Nikki?
P7, well done.
It could easily be a factor as well. I mean, another reason why he could be dipping out in terms of that apex speed could be the tyre, the tyre management and delivery through the session. For whatever reason, though, it was those medium and high-speed corners where McLaren had the edge.
Yeah, well, Lando Norris, of course, with a lot of pressure coming into this weekend. Let's how he feels after that first session for him.
Hey Lando, well I know you love this place. Was it quite good to get out there in FP2 after missing FP1 and kind of just get some laps on the board?
I mean, I didn't mind sitting on the pit wall. I felt a lot more relaxed there than in the car, but especially around here. But you're right, I mean, I've always enjoyed this place. I think the car felt good from the off. You know, Alex gave good feedback this morning after FP1, and he was on the pace straight away. So it was good to see, and yeah, I think they moved the car in the right direction for FP2. And we just need to understand if we want more of that tomorrow or a little bit less or somewhere in the middle. So yeah, good steps in the right direction, but still a little bit more to come, hopefully.
Even on the laps where maybe you didn't look the cleanest, you were still fast. That must be really encouraging as you kind of move through the weekend, find some kind of gains overnight and try to get the car in better shape for tomorrow.
For sure. I mean, I think as a team we seemed a bit more competitive. I think we definitely didn't look that good this morning. So I think we did move things in the right direction. I think, as always, where we are very quick in FP2 at times, we've showed a bit more pace than some of the others. And I certainly think they're going to catch up. Max is not far behind, and they normally improve a lot into Saturday. So, you know, I expect still a good day tomorrow, and I'm sure we'll improve on some things, but it's not as easy as maybe it looked today. I think it's still going to be tight tomorrow. It always is. There's no reason for it not to be, and but we'll work hard to make it as big of a gap as possible.
When you were doing the longer stints on the tyres, did the car feel kind of good on those kind of compounds as well?
Yes, I think that's where, you know, I was probably a little bit behind, more so than the single kind of push laps. It's just yeah, catching up with knowing how much to push, where and when and things like that. Yeah, it's more about the finer details in the high fuel than it is in the low fuel. The lower fuel is more, well, you're natural, you're just pushing it to the limit, and it's easier to kind of maybe find that. Then the high fuel is not about pushing it to the limit, you know, it's about understanding every part of a corner, how much to push the braking, how much to not push the tyres and all these things. So, yeah, considering I didn't do FP1, I think in a happy place.
And just finally, I know sometimes it's hard to read, but a few updates on the car here. Could you kind of get a read in that one session of whether or not it's made it any better?
I'll just say yes, but yeah, I need to see with the team. I don't know. We're doing different tests between cars, as always, when we have new parts on the car. So I'm sure things have all moved in the right direction. How much and the quantity of things is hard to know, but I'll see with the team later.
Great stuff. Thanks, Lando.
Well, understandably so. A rather positive Lando Norris there. But let's quickly recap of who did well, who's got work to do. Alex?
Impressive run from Stroll to find himself further up the field. You know, it's the nature of this place that if you connect the apexes, not to take anything away from a Stroll, but find yourself a bit of a toe as well, you can really put a lap in because the gaps are so small in terms of who's struggling. Gasly, I really think, you know, not just in terms of total performance, but also, and more importantly, I think, in terms of race preparation, you do not want to be hearing the car feels disconnected, the car feels terrible, because you need to carry race pace here to be able to maintain position.
Yeah, and it's also worth mentioning, of course, that incident with Antonelli going past Lewis Hamilton, basically traffic impeding Antonelli on track, and I think it is now under investigation, so we'll keep an eye on that one.
Yeah, and probably Hamilton is the one that disappointed me a bit because, okay, it was in the middle here, not easy, because he didn't saw Antonelli in the mirror while he was launched to the brake of turn 4, downhill, not an easy one. Yeah. And Antonelli was forced to use the escape road on the left. By luck was an easy place to try to find the way, but was a bit risky. Maybe Hamilton was expecting a bit more than from him. Usually in the last few races, it seems that he doesn't have this feeling, doesn't have this rhythm. And also today, Leclerc missed completely the first session because Dino Beganovic was running, and immediately jumping in the car immediately in the first run was equal time. Second run immediately better than Hamilton. You know, from a champion like him, I would like to see him, you know, on the top 5 regularly. And so that is my down, and my high is Bortoleto.
Yes, I
top
really
10
wanted to
this
talk to him.
morning,
Thank
top
you
10
for
this
mentioning
afternoon,
him.
and I start to like this team. Because they were on points in Barcelona, they were amazing. They were on points with Hülkenberg in Canada. Again here, they're on top 10. I mean, they're coming back, huh?
Yeah, a much more difficult session as well for Williams, wasn't it? After they looked relatively strong this morning, to find the two cars towards the rear of the field surprised me actually with Williams. So that was interesting. Slightly tricky session for Racing Bulls. But yeah, interesting one. Only one free practice session. We'll see you all tomorrow.
Oh, we will indeed. Still so much to play for, which reminds me, here are all the times you need to pop in your calendar to make sure you don't miss a minute of action here in Austria. So join us tomorrow. It is FP3. The last of the practice sessions will be kicking off at 12:15. And then shortly after, it's a half an hour pre-qualifying show. And then into qualifying, find out who will be crowned pole position here. And then Sunday, the big showdown. The race kicks off at 3 o'clock, but we will be on air an hour before for the pre-race show, bringing you all the action from the pit lane, and of course we will be live on the grid. Thank you so much for joining us here in Austria for FP2. Plenty to talk about and plenty to look forward to as well. Join us tomorrow because it will be FP3 and then qualifying. Find out if Max Verstappen can reign strong and take another pole position. He's had 5 consecutive ones so far. Can he make it a 6th?